You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to On the Way. I am Beth White. I am your host this morning from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And I am really grateful to be with you on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Up today, we're going to have a conversation. Last month, we talked a little bit about transition, and we're going to talk about with two of the leaders that I work with in the Renew My Church process, and specifically in building the new reality. So up first, I have Tim Weisky. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So Tim is the director for the Office for Parish Vitality and Mission. I should have that memorized. I've worked there for years. And Tim is joining us. I invited Tim on. He took over that role about a year and a half ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tim? Great. So up until last fall, our Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship and really building the new reality was separate from DPVM, and we've moved back over to the Parish Vitality and Mission Office. So I asked Tim to come on and just have a conversation about transition and about his role. So welcome. So before we move into that, Tim, we have something to celebrate. We are finished with what in this Archdiocese?
The Discernment and Decision Structural Reconfiguration process.
Excellent. And Tim was really instrumental in that, right?
Yep, that was starting, 2015 in terms of the planning, and then 2017, the pilot groupings, and now 2 weeks ago, the final announcements of parish configuration changes.
And so we had how many parishes and now how many?
Started with 344, and then when the changes for July 1st happen this year, we'll have 216.
Okay. 216. Excellent. So could you share with our listeners just a little bit about why we went through that process and what that's leading us into now?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the structural renewal, we talk often about spiritual and structural renewal. The need to have the right foundation in place for our parishes to then move forward and focus on evangelization, equipping us to be missionary disciples, reaching out to others in our communities. It was important to have that foundation first. As we look at some of the symptoms of issues over time, when we had some town halls back in winter 2016, certainly declining mass attendance pre-COVID was a big issue, declining engagement of people, fewer priests, high capital needs, and generally many parishes that were not operationally able to invest in staff to support the pastor with ministry. Certainly we have some very well-resourced parishes, but when we look across the board at having parishes capable of not just paying the bills, but really being able to focus and invest in vitality from both a financial and people standpoint, that's why we need a structural renewal. It's hard to evangelize if 100% of the attention is on necessary maintenance. So that was the goal, is to move away from 100% of attention in many places of necessary maintenance to hopefully having a stronger foundation to focus more of that time, more of the time, talent, and treasure that we have in our parishes on outward mission, in addition to the necessary maintenance that is required in a parish.
So I do want to take a moment and acknowledge how hard that has been for parishes, how painful it has been for people to, even parishes that we have communities that had no structural change whatsoever. And then we have communities that sort of unified together, and maybe there's one main parish that persists. Even their communities have changed, right? So there's a sense of a lot of upheaval and change. How have we been able to sort of maybe mitigate a little bit of that and really acknowledge that pain?
hmm Uh, we're blessed that we had a team throughout the last 6, 7 years focused on pastoral accompaniment.
Hmm.
Right now, at this time, it's Kathy Walls. She was the leader for the last 3 years. It started with Sister Kathy Brazda, who's a sister of Congregation of St. Joseph. She started it, and then when she was elected to her congregation leadership, Kathy Walls stepped in. So for a good couple of years, we had a team of three. And then as a couple members had great opportunities elsewhere, now Kathy is the team. And what she does is offer a lot of training to parishioners in the pews called pastoral accompaniment skills training to help listen to each other,
Mm.
to be attentive to the pain and emotions and feelings that are in place. Certainly, those of us from Archdiocesan staff, in particular Kathy, many of the vicariate-based staff, the parish vitality coordinators, they do that as well. So we do that from the arch, spending time listening. But a lot of what Kathy has done is equip people in the pews to listen to each other and to be there in that time of needing someone to walk with them through the emotion. Kathy can only be so many places at one time, so she's done a great job of building out a small team of facilitators to help with those trainings. And then when necessary, hosting listening sessions with either led by her or one of our team members, and when makes sense for the bishop to be present, the regional bishop to be present as well.
So a lot of dioceses, what they do is the bishop or the cardinal will just sort of make a decision about which parishes will close, new names. I don't know. There's no other better way to say it than they sort of rip off the Band-Aid and they just get it done overnight. Why did we, just to remind our listeners, why did we choose this process instead, where we go and we put people in parishes in groupings and we put them through a process of really reflection? Why did we choose this process?
Mm-hmm. As we were building out the plan of how do we approach this process, we saw some of the pitfalls in other places, whether it was too little consultation, whether there was not enough resources to help with the implementation. A couple of the big factors we wanted to make sure were in place is bottoms-up input, but also guided by some guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So there's consistency across the archdiocese. That was a really big factor in the beginning that both priests and lay people said is that there's consistency across the archdiocese. So that was one. From a perspective of organizationally making the best decisions possible, that's not going to happen just from central planning.
Yeah.
It never does. So the bottoms-up input really from each grouping helped give flavor to here's the realities to know for the advisory groups and then cardinal to
Mm-hmm.
make the eventual decisions. So that's really important because the data, the quantitative data can only tell so much. The local lived experience is really important to understand the dynamics of a particular area. But we also were very clear at the beginning that only one person has the authority and responsibility to make a decision, and that's the ordinary, so Cardinal Supich. And we wanted to bring him the best information possible to make decisions. And there are factors that affect the whole diocese: the priest numbers, declining participation, the declining number of lay ministers.
Yeah.
So that's also where it's not just the local recommendation or the local input, was also guided by consistent guidelines from across, applied to the whole archdiocese.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it was really important to us to have both the local bottoms-up input, but also the lack of better word, top-down guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, generally, human nature will be, well, have as little change as possible, and then we just keep ticking along until there's an inevitable decision based on that might need to be made in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, based on there's just no other choice versus trying to proactively set up our foundation for focusing on renewal.
And one of the unique things about this process, someone who's been a part of it for almost 7 years, is that we always had an eye on the spiritual. So as you said in the beginning, that there was the structural renewal, but it was always hand in hand with an understanding that it was being done for the spiritual renewal. And so while parishes, we had slow sort of onboarding of parishes, right? So we would have a few groupings of more, and then my office, then we would start walking with those who come through that process to the other side, and we start walking with them. So now you are sort of in charge of this new spiritual side. You're guiding us. He's my new boss. And so tell us a little bit about what excites you about sort of, you've seen the very beginning before there was even conversations about we need to do this, into how do we make that happen? And now you're moving over into the spiritual side. So what is that like for you?
Well, it's nice to see this isn't just about organizational decisions. This is about connecting people to the person of Jesus Christ so it transforms their lives. Hopefully we have a lot of disciples in the missionary disciples that are then inspired to take that further. Disciples become missionary disciples, and maybe people who are present but not really connected to their faith as disciples to take that next step in their journey. Also, then we can reach out to those who are completely disconnected and don't have that foundation of faith that we want for people. So it's nice to see how we are now connecting that. What we said from the beginning, this isn't just about organizational restructuring. This is about moving us forward to be able to focus on spiritual renewal. It's nice to actually see that in practice. And we know in many places that have reconfigured, it's going to take time. It's reality. It's a human reality that we're changing the structure where people have worshiped, prayed, done ministry. It takes time. So we understand that for parishes that had a reconfiguration, it's going to take time before they're fully ready to dive deeply into the spiritual renewal work, the work that Beth, your team in particular, leads. How do we build an evangelization team? But the early fruits of those who have begun engaging, it's just exciting to see people who have been in leadership, or maybe people who haven't been in leadership, being empowered to really see how, with the support of the pastor, but how do we as lay people take our individual mission to bring the gospel to others, to help connect people into an entry point into that faith journey, that discipleship journey. So it is exciting to see, because a lot of it is, we want metrics, yes, but the exciting piece is individual stories that really bring to life, this is why we do what we do as church, to bring people into relationship with Jesus.
And that, the whole having in mind, because this is a long game, right? So when 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when the whole conversation started happening, this was sort of, I mean, it's been lived out. We didn't exactly know what spiritual renewal was going to look like any more than we sort of knew what it was. It's funny.
Town halls in 2016 where we had people text in, what do you think we need to do? And it was evangelization with youth ministry in there too. So there was a clear recognition of what the broad scope, but as your team who's now led, how do we make that come to life?
Right.
Because that's been the challenge, and also helping people see evangelization is part of our mission. So it's great to see that 7 years ago we named it, or people named it, and then it's your team with many others in the department who are helping bring that to life.
Yeah, the word evangelization was not a well thought of word when I first arrived, to be quite honest. I tell the story that I'd ask groups of people, how many of you think that evangelization is a Protestant? And oh my gosh, 3/4 of the room's hands would go up. And then a few years ago, I stopped asking the question because I would ask the question and no hands went up, right? So it was this sense of, wow, we've sort of moved past that. Plus, when I got more into this, I came to realize evangelization itself is a Catholic term. Our Protestant brothers and sisters are like, what does that mean? And so it's kind of funny. So we're going to take a break here, and we're going to come back and continue our conversation with Tim Weisky from the Department of Parish Vitality and Mission.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship programs provide a free opportunity for young adults to spend time with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youth aged 9 through 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports every relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that can help young adults build confidence and enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. To learn more, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7970 in Cook County and 847-782-4224 in Lake County. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today.
Make a difference every day by working in Archdiocese of Chicago schools, parishes, and ministries. Join us at our career fair on Saturday, February 25th in downtown Chicago. We are hiring full and part-time positions for roles from teaching to finance, administration to pastoral care throughout Cook and Lake counties. If you have recently graduated or are exploring a job change, serve your community and build your career with the Arch. Find more information at archchicago.org.
For more than 20 years, Catholic Charities Adult Protective Services has been advocating for seniors who are the victims of abuse, neglect, confinement, or financial exploitation. With our partners at local, city, and state agencies, our trained case managers follow through on every concern that is brought to our attention in a cooperative way to ensure that our seniors are safe and protected. According to the Illinois Department on Aging, last year nearly 21,000 cases of elder abuse were reported in Illinois. Of these, only 5% were reported by seniors themselves. So raising awareness is an important part of this issue. If you are concerned about a senior you know, call 800-252-8966. That's 800-252-8966. With your help, we can stop elder abuse and look out for the seniors in our lives.
Can a dead man come back to life? Can a dead man come back to life? For this I know I'm only alive because I'm a man that calls Jesus.
Welcome back to On the Way. I am Beth White, your host this morning for On the Way from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship. So I am speaking right now with Tim Weisky, and we'll continue our conversation. So Tim is the Director of Parish Vitality and Mission here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So before the break, we were talking a lot about how Renew My Church and how we've transitioned now pretty fully this year into building the new reality and really moving into this spiritual renewal. While we have several parishes that are early in the process, we have several more that are just getting started or won't enter into the formal part of spiritual renewal for probably a year or so, just because they have healing to do and things like that. So Tim, as you consider now that you've sort of closed the door on, or as Father Jason would say, close the book on decisions and discernment, what are your hopes for this next phase of renewal? What are your dreams for it? What gets you up like excited about what's going to happen next?
So if I put my lay parishioner hat on, not department organizational hat on, I think just seeing more and more people first get the aha moment of it's about more than just my faith. My faith is called to go and share it with others. So the first aha moment. The second would be, well, how do we, so now getting to what do we do? How do we equip people to do that? Both from the parish systematic process, which we have a strong conviction there's a need for what we call charismatic soft entry points, but also as just individuals, how do we equip them to have that conversation with the neighbor, listen, ask good questions, help draw someone into that desire to explore faith. So it's not necessarily about just saying, here's the apologetics of our faith. It's important, but starting with listening and asking good questions, because it's about inspiring them to want to explore. So seeing those aha moments when that will happen for people, to me, that's what's exciting, because it's individual by individual. We work a lot on parish system level
Yeah, we do.
work, but it comes to life through individuals.
Mm-hmm. On a personal level, because this isn't a show about evangelization, not to get too personal, but you are a father of 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, is it partly what drives you to want to do this kind of work? You don't have a theology degree. You actually have a background in business, and you've spent the disproportionate amount of your career now working here, right? And so what is it that gives you life in this kind of work?
That's where we have to learn to tell our story, and I'm just the same. Because I can't speak to one moment that is like that was an aha moment. There's a lot of different times where it's, oh, okay, that's helped lead me here. Part of it was my family background growing up. It's sort of through osmosis. My brother was called to be a diocesan priest in Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. So he's up in Hibbing, Minnesota now. My dad was ordained a permanent deacon in 2004. So there's something of just seeing different vocational ministries in my family. So led me to be exploring when I was moving out. My first step in career in management consulting was go check something out for a couple of years, and now I'm here 10 years later. But it was literally someone asking me, well, what do you want to do? I thought about something in nonprofit or something with the church would be cool. And now we're 10 years later. And just because there was that sense of call, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So for me, it's sort of been innate and really shaped by my family growing up. And then moving forward, I think just seeing how do we make our parishes places that are inviting, welcoming, exciting for my kids to be at as they get older. And then when they get to be more mature in their faith, that there will be others in the pews that can journey with them on it. So it's not just us as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, but also the parish family community that we're journeying together to go deeper in our faith lives. So I think that's what I would hope to see as we move forward. But that type of journey also becomes much more common.
So you recently, Tim is a great learner, so he participated in our evangelization team training. I heard from your small group facilitator that you were very engaged, which is good to hear. What was it like for you? It's just a random question, but you were in there with people who are on an evangelization team that are getting ready to activate. They were just chosen, maybe even not even knowing what this role is. And they were just asked to participate in this 4-week training process. And what was that like for you from your perspective in your role?
Well, it's helpful to see how does this work on the ground? How are the individuals who are being asked, empowered by their pastor, by their evangelization lead, getting formed for this ministry? Because it's frankly very different than most of what we've done in the past. We know that some parishes here and there's been evangelizational work in the way that we think about it at the office, but by and large, not.
Right.
Because we are in this new missionary age that we talk about. So to actually process it, to get how will this work on the ground is really important to me. As at the organizational level, we evaluate what do we need to do to best support this ministry. I find that hard to do without knowing how the people on the ground are receiving it, processing it, the questions they're asking. And also most of the people in the small group I was at are at a parish that I often attend with my family. So just sort of making the connections of how will this play out at a place that I actually see it, what was helpful as well.
And what were the folks like in your small group? What was that like? Because I always get inspired by just the average parishioner who says yes to something they don't even know what it is.
hmm I think hopeful. I think, um, oh, what's the right word here? Um, Humble in the sense of recognizing this is something new that will be challenging, that we need to be open to uh, guidance given from what your team is doing in particular, from what the pastors are suggesting and what they're receiving. Uh, so hopeful, humble, and yeah, I think inspiring too. Of there's people who want to do this. They want to see people's lives touched that will be transformed when they encounter Christ either for the first time or in a new way.
And part of it for us is also underscoring the remembering, right? That
hmm
we do believe that some folks have never encountered Jesus fully. That they perhaps have gone to mass for years, and perhaps they haven't had that not a moment, but they haven't really come to see Jesus as this live person who they can dialogue with and be in relationship with, right? But there's many who have, and providing space for folks to remember that is kind of a, I don't know. That's what I love, is that obviously the first encounters, but also helping people name those times in their
Right.
lives, right?
Right. Yeah, I think we hear that a lot in stories that come up as, oh, now I understand how God was working in my life. It's the unpacking or the recognition, uh, looking back, and then also moving forward, and have those aha moments for people.
Because we have this, people say, "Oh, what a coincidence," and we say, "People of faith, we don't believe in coincidence. God is at work in people's life." So we have a couple minutes left, and we're about ready to enter Lent next week. Can you believe it? It's kind of crazy. Next week will be Ash Wednesday. So as you reflect, do you have any suggestions for our listeners as we move fully into this spiritual renewal here in the diocese? What is there anything that you ask for prayers for, or just you suggest that they get involved with? Is there anything from your perspective that you think could be helpful?
I think praying for a spirit of renewal in all of us, in our parishes, but the spirit of renewal touches all of us would be important. It's always important to pray. And I think just keep eyes and ears open for anything that would help us as, I imagine those who are listening are probably pretty engaged. What will help me be more comfortable sharing my faith in an appropriate way, listening to others, because I do have a belief that that's often the first step.
Yeah.
Asking good questions. So how do I equip myself to first listen, to ask good questions, and to be prepared to share my reason for hope? I think all three of those can be good reflections during the Lenten season that we can then put into action in our own lives as well.
I love that. My reason for hope. Our world is really struggling right now in so many ways. And as people of faith, we actually literally have really great news. And but we're sometimes scared to share it. And so having that ability the humility that you just talked about, and the vulnerability, because people are scared they're going to get rejected, or all of those kinds of things. So thank you so much for sharing with us this morning, sharing your story, and just look forward to the months and years ahead of wherever this takes us. So thank you so much, Tim.
Thanks, Beth. Good to be with you.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning, because really you are changing lives, you are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
The cemetery ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Welcome back to On the Way. I am Beth White, your host this morning. And we just finished our conversation with Tim Weisky from the Department of Parish Vitality and Mission. And up next, I invite my second guest, Katie Bach, who is the Director of Building the New Reality, BNR Implementation. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, Beth.
Katie has that awesome background from during her last parental leave. She put up nice, beautiful wallpaper in her office. I'm very jealous. I have these awesome walls behind me. So Katie, thank you for coming. So we were just having a conversation with Tim Weisky, and Tim is also Katie's boss. He's also my boss too. So Katie and I work in parallel in a lot of ways. I work for the evangelization, getting the ministry side, and Katie really has been overseeing sort of the implementation in the vicariate level, really working with the parish vitality ministers, which coordinators, parish vitality coordinators who are ministers, and the lifelong formation coordinators. So Katie, would you just share with us a little bit about your role, and how that's lived out in terms of supporting the teams in the vicariates?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Beth. I think the best way to think about my role is and I mean this sincerely, I have the privilege of overseeing all the implementation of Building the New Reality. So the spiritual renewal of our parishes, and I get the privilege of leading the team who are walking with the pastors and their communities as they live into the new reality, which is really about changing the culture, bringing people into relationship with Christ, and expanding and growing our body of Christ. So it is very exciting work. As soon as pastors generally are done with decisions and discernment, our team will formally begin working with them and really drive them and walk with them through the process of understanding how we set vision, understanding how we live into a new reality that each of us is called to do. And then that's happening all across the city in all different communities, all types of parishes, with my team of the parish vitality coordinators. So it's super exciting work. Never ever the same day that we have, as everything is constantly moving and evolving and growing and changing as we all journey through Renewal together.
So one of the after decisions of discernment, the parishes that have no structural change pretty rapidly start working with their parish vitality coordinator. And then those parishes that have had some sort of unification, they usually take 6 months to a year before they start really working with us. They have what we call operations transition, to remind our listeners, where if they're unifying, they have to figure out a new name, and they have to have new tax ID numbers, and they need to do a new bulletin and all those kinds of things that you don't really think about. So the Archdiocese sends in a team to help them build out their budget, to really figure out their personnel, their buildings, and how are their buildings going to get taken care of and all of that. So that's a lot of work. So we're like, just do that. Plus, we ask them during that time to really work on how do you bring your community together? How are you bringing healing? So Tim mentioned the accompaniment team, which is really Kathy Walls now, really that sense of listening, building in space where people are getting to know each other as they build this new community. So the parish vitality coordinator, when he or she sort of starts to engage, we do what's called tilling the soil. Could you explain to our listeners what is entailed in tilling the soil whenever that takes place? That's sort of the entry point into building the new reality.
Yeah, I think, and it's a really important, place to start, right? If we think about the parable of the sower, or any garden or any initiative that any of us are growing, there is a season of preparation, if you will. And so during that phase, the parish vitality coordinator really works closely with the pastor and sometimes with key leaders around him or a trusted circle of parishioners to get ready, right? The work that we do in Renewal is both mind and heart, and both of those really have to work together. And so we might expose them to just understanding what the vision is in their own words, in our words, in the Cardinal's words, in the Pope's words, right? And then how that's going to be lived out. And also too, right, we really hope to ignite them. Many of the pastors and their teams that we work with have a really, really strong conviction about renewal, the need for renewal, and the belief that renewal is possible. And we hope to continue to ignite that so that they're in a state of preparedness for the heavy work of renewal, which comes with time. And so we might do things like I mentioned, like a little bit of vision sharing. We might engage in a book club. One of the offerings that we have is called Kickstart, and it's a series of videos and conversations for pastors to again, just really get them thinking differently about what this vision will look like, what their lived reality can and should and will be one day as we all bring more and more people into relationship with Christ.
So what are the topics, not to put you on the spot here, but I am. What are some of the key topics in that Kickstart? What are the things that pastors are wrestling with? Because I think I think what's really interesting for our work is that most of our pastors were formed in a way that prepared them to serve the people that showed up in their parish. They had plenty of people coming through the doors. There was plenty of things to do. There were plenty of priests. But now many of our people are out there. And what are some of the topics that the pastor is sort of having to wrestle with in this new reality?
Sure. Yeah. I think the first one definitely is vision, right? I don't think the first one is. The first one is vision, right?
So where are we going? Right.
Yeah. Where are we going? Setting that kind of North Star, setting that place of where we're going, right? Through all of our work. So we start there, right? What does that mean? How is it different than just a to-do list? How is it really a feeling and a state of being and a culture for which we want our parishes to be? Another one is building a leadership team, right? This sometimes is a new idea that, it takes all of us, right? And we are all called to do this work.
And that's distinct from a parish council, and that's distinct usually from a parish staff, right? So the leadership team. Could you just explain a little bit to our listeners what we mean by a leadership team?
Yeah. So these individuals, will hold that vision for the parish, right? And they are the ones that really provide that anchor to always call us back to are the decisions that we're making, the steps that we're taking, the things that we're trying, or the things that we're sunsetting, are they aligned to where we are going as a community? So they're a trusted group. Sometimes they've been around for a long time, sometimes they haven't.
Sometimes they're staff, sometimes they're not. It's a mix, right?
Yep. And even sometimes, like, our PVCs, our parish vitality coordinators are really deeply embedded in those teams, because this is kind of the captain of the renewal ship, if you will, this team, and really helping. What this does is calls us all to, and those on the team, to share that leadership. Right. And have trusted people around you who are all doing this work and all rowing in the same direction.
So part of it is, I love the image of rowing in the same direction. Part of it is that many of our pastors have been sort of formed to be, for no other term, like sort of the benevolent, I'm going to stress benevolent, but dictator. They're the ones that have to have all the answers, make all the decisions, everything from the boiler to how to baptize, like everything in between. They are sort of in charge. Well, that's just not sort of doable in our modern world. And so this team of folks are complementary to the pastor, right? And so at the end of the day, the buck stops always with the pastor. We know that, canon law. But what we're seeing is the fruit of this is that the pastor is being able to share leadership, like you said, and also be able to be, hey, Katie, could you take care of the boiler? Hey, Paul, could you help me? Whatever. So that there's this, and also then they can have a conversation with trusted people to be able to make decisions in a healthy way, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important point is, and many of them start with a tool like APEST, right? Where they really lean into what their strengths are, because that exercise, even just acknowledging, hey, like, I'm a really good strategist, but Beth, like, you're the expert in evangelization, right? And so we need each other,
right,
in a really complete way,
right. Okay, so what's another topic?
Yeah, so we have prioritization of evangelization, which certainly is your bread and butter. And that one, is in all that we do and say, right? Prioritizing the work of evangelization, and really making our places one that represents that culture. Our parish is a place that represents that culture and feels different and unique and really,
and the need for that. Like, this topic is to say we've got to think about it differently. We got to think about how we're creating, not only within our parish, a place of welcoming and being able to accompany people from trust all the way through their discipleship to missionary discipleship, but also how are we forming people, as Tim talked about earlier, to be able to share their faith, to be able to just tell their story, to be able to listen. And so that's sort of making that a priority in a parish, getting back to the basics of Jesus calling us to go make disciples.
Yeah.
What's next on the list?
Yeah, no, and I think that one is a shift, right? And so it's
Big
really,
shift.
really important that we spend all this time working through that topic, because the inclination is to just, add another thing or try something else, or who's got the next great idea, right? And our approach really is everything you just listed, right? Listening, meeting people where they are, walking with them. Those pieces are harder sometimes in some capacity, but they're also stickier, and they're changing the culture that we want to move towards. The next two kind of go together. So structure and hybrid of church, right? This is kind of how we're thinking about, how we sit in terms of our current churches, not only like physically, but, kind of similar to the leadership team, right? That's a new piece of the puzzle. And we really have to push our thinking into this looks different. Like this is a different missionary moment that we find ourselves in. And it's okay to wrestle with things like structure and hybrid, but then also the fifth one is meetings and healthy conflict, right? You talked a little bit about how, the buck stops with the pastor, it does, right? But also too, when you have that trusted body of individuals working around you, there's a lot of power in that and a really incredible fruits that we see.
Well, they're not going to say, yes, Father. They're going to say, maybe we could think about it this way, Father, or have you ever thought about this, Father, or I really don't agree with you, Father.
Sure.
And that's healthy conflict, right?
Yeah.
Because I kept saying Father there. It's very respectful, but it's a sense of really giving people the space to bring their gifts, like you said, the APEST, and that is apostle, priest, evangelizer, shepherd, teacher.
And teacher.
And it's based on, I forget which scripture. Do you remember which scripture? So you can Google it, APEST, to our listeners. You can take a look. It's a really wonderful free exercise just to think about your leadership style. So we're going to take a break, and we will come back and continue our conversation with Katie Bach about building the new reality here in the Archdiocese.
Community is core to Catholic Charities' founding mission. For more than 100 years, we have met people and families where they are, serving anyone in need, regardless of their faith, gender, race, or ethnicity. As our world absorbs the economic, political, and social aftershocks of the pandemic, 50% or more of the 6 million people living in Cook and Lake counties have little or no savings. They are a paycheck away from zero. We are deeply grateful to everyone in the Catholic Charities community who partners with us to alleviate the suffering of the people we serve and offer them a better path forward. We are witnessing a message of mercy and hope to a world very much in need. Learn more at CatholicCharities.net.
Welcome back.
Es fabuloso verlos.
Dobrze jest znowu być razem.
It's good to be together again.
After so many months apart, pandemic capacity limits have been lifted, and we want to welcome everyone back to church. We can all pray together again. And listen as our choirs lift their voices in song.
We've been together in spirit.
And now, when you are ready, our doors are open wide.
Nuestras puertas están abiertas de par en par.
Nasze drzwi są otwarte.
And we're here to welcome you back to Catholic Mass.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
Can a dead man come back to life? Can a dead man come back to life? For this I know I'm only alive because of a man that calls Jesus Christ. I'm a dead
Welcome back to On the Way. I'm Beth White, your host from the Office for Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship. And we're continuing our conversation with Katie Bach, who is the director of BNR, Building the New Reality implementation here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So, Katie, first half hour we were talking to Tim Weisky, and Tim has a business background. I pointed that out, and so do you. So you come to us sort of from a teaching as well as a business background. And so I ask you, what drew you to this kind of work, working for the church?
To the question, to me, this is the best kind of work that I can do with my business background. So I started my career as a teacher. I was working in some of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City and Chicago, and I loved it. And I was so drawn to the work that we were doing. But I wanted to finish my business school and studies and get my master's. And then I was really looking for something after I did a little bit of work in corporate America. I was really looking for something that blended the high impact work that I was doing in the classroom with the work that I was doing in corporate America, and using my MBA that I had earned. And so I found the Archdiocese, and it's really, really incredible, because a little bit of what we were talking about before with the leadership team is what I'm finding is we each bring different gifts and skills and experiences to this work, and the renewal of the Catholic Church of Chicago is for all of us. And so, you know, the skills that I bring are different but complementary to the skills of everybody else on the team. And so it's an exciting place to get up and get going every morning and really pour my heart and my skills, I like to think, some days into the work.
So when you think about renewal here in the Archdiocese, what is for you? Obviously, this is a radio show of the Office for Evangelization, so I try to get a little personal. So what is it for you that excites you, not just professionally, but personally? Not to overshare, but Katie has had a spiritual journey during this time. This has been a lot of growth. And what have you come to learn, and what are some of your hopes for the people here in this diocese?
Yeah, it's been a really special. So I just celebrated 4 years in January, which is incredible how fast time flies. And quite frankly, I had
and she made two human beings during that time. So go ahead, as she says.
Yeah, I think when I started considering coming to work for the Arch, I was very unfamiliar with even like the Archdiocesan central offices, if you will, right? I had gone to Catholic school. I'm 100% Catholic educated through my master's, but it never had dawned on me like, oh, there must be a central team like helping all these trains continue to move, as I like to say. And so coming in my first few months was really, really clear how much everybody on our team is on a mission, right? And I sensed that from the first lunch that I had with some dear friends and colleagues of ours now, and all the way through. And I think that continues to fill my cup, right? As I work and very closely with you, Beth, to drive this humongous project that we're taking on. And I think too, right? Like you said, like, yeah, in the past 4 years, I've created two humans, and showing them and leading them through faith has been really, really transformative for me. I'm not sure if 8, 9, 10 years ago, before I was even married, right, that faith and a relationship with Christ would be one of our top things. And that might have looked like going to church, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we'll get the sacraments, and you'll probably go to Catholic school, right? But now my journey has been so much deeper, and I just hope to give a little bit of that to them, and really, really just help them form their own relationship from a really young age. So it's not just, yeah, I'm 100% college educated or Catholic educated, right? It's I actually know Jesus, and I know that he loves me, and I know that he is there for me, and so that's what I hope, and that's
you
what
want
I
your
keep,
kids to have that.
inspired by him.
Yeah. So Katie is also a marathon runner. She loves to get out there and run, unlike me. And so I love to use that analogy, and Katie gets all jazzed because this is not renewal. What we're trying to do is not it's not a sprint. It's not hurdles you jump over and you're done, right? It's a long haul. So, quite honestly, your personal story of being a marathoner, how does that prepare you to understand this kind of work?
Yeah, well, thank you for the analogy because I love it. And it really does speak to our work, right? Our work is, we just talked a little bit about that tilling the soil phase, right? That's when I'm getting ready to start training, right? And then, right, if you think about a marathon distance,
Get your muscles ready, right? Yeah.
Right, you're stretching, you're hydrating, you're doing all those things over and over and over again because we've set that North Star of like, I want that finish line, just like we've set our vision for Renewal. And so what I think also is worth noting, right, in a marathon is it's a day in and day out grind, right? There's not a day that goes by where we're not stretching or hydrating or running.
You have bad runs and you're exhausted, and then you have good ones and you're like, woo, and the next day it's really bad again, right?
Yeah, it's all of that, right? Yeah. It's joy-filled, it's painful, it's exciting, it's annoying, right? It's frustrating, it's all of those things.
But it's persistence.
It's persistent, right? It's that daily commitment to what we're doing, despite all of those, or in spite of all of those things that we will inevitably face, right? And then I think the other thing that is really, really empowering when I'm marathon training, but also really speaks to our work of Renewal, is there are so many different people on different places in the journey.
Yeah.
Right. And it speaks to a lot of the work that you do with evangelization too. But right, there are some people that have never marathoned before that I can turn around and say, hey, just try this, or have you considered this, or how are you doing? Right. And just walking with them. And then there's people way ahead of me who are running an hour faster than I am, right? Who I look to and say, hey, like, we're all in this together, and can you help me with what your experience has been? And can you walk with me and listen to me? And so it's a really, really important piece, that power of community. Yeah. All driving towards the same thing.
And when we don't have much time left, but when we talk about building the new reality, I used Katie's analogy, and I actually think it's a great one, is that we have parishes that have gone through decisions and discernment, and then we ask them we use the parable of the sower, tilling the soil. We use different analogies to try to, like Jesus did, parables, right? And we say that many parishes are haven't even thought about getting in the race. They have a lot to do. Some are prepping and they're doing their carb loading. Some are at the starting gate, and some have been at this for a couple miles, and some are like 7 miles in maybe. But we are far from a diocese where we have marathon completers at this point. Like it is a long haul, and that's hard sometimes because we want things to be quick and done. So with our last minute, what is your advice for our listeners about sort of how do you get through recognizing that you might not have your parish change overnight, but what is your advice for them?
Yeah, I think I was actually listening to a really powerful podcast this morning about it's like a not yet, but you celebrate the process, right? So it's okay to be in the not yet, but we live in a space where, what's my feedback right now? What's my grade? How am I doing? How am I progressing? Right? We live in this constant loop of like, yeah, right. And there is a certain wheel of you're doing great, you're not doing great, right? There's participation ribbons as we say it. But that not yet, and celebrating the process and the strategy and the effort, I think is really, really important as we continue in this work.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for your time, and just really thank you so much for all you do. And so to our listeners, just pray and figure out how you can participate in building the new reality in your local parish.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.